Okay, welcome back to episode 24 of my Yamaha Virago Cafe Racer project. My name is Scott McCutcheon of Siren Studios. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry it's been so long. I've just been super busy and haven't had much time to work on the bike. But we're going to get back to it today. So we're going to go ahead and put the front wheel back on now that we got the tire replaced and the wheel painted and everything like that. So we're going to get the front wheel back on. We'll slap on some new brake pads and check out how those are installed. And we're going to see if we can clean the fork seals. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress through this video today. And then hopefully we can get this thing back on the ground today. So once it's back on the ground, we'll install the battery box, which I've mostly finished up. It's this thing over here, and mostly finished that up. I just need to weld a couple more tabs and then paint it, and it should be good to go. But we'll save that for the next video probably. And yeah, so making pretty good progress, and let's get started. Okay, so if you recall from the last video, when I went out and bought my CRF, I got them to put new tires on the Virago's rims. So unfortunately I wasn't able to find matching tires in the appropriate sizes. So I ended up going with these Michelin Pilot Power 2s, Pilot Power 2 CT, I think is what they are, yeah. And they're 120/70 ZR17s on the front, which I think is the OEM size for the R6. Perfect for that. On the rear, I couldn't find one I couldn't find another Pilot Power in the same size that I wanted to put back here. So I ended up going with a Michelin Commander 2. And we put that one on in the last video, and I think that's a good tire. But I tried to get as close to the tread pattern as possible. Unfortunately I didn't quite succeed. I mean, they're not the same tire, but they're relatively close. So I think it's going to end up being pretty good rubber either way. That being said, popping this guy back on is pretty much the same process, just in reverse, that we showed in the last video. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, once you get the rotors back on, make sure they're tightened down and torqued properly. And then don't forget about your two spacers and your axle. This axle doesn't look like it's in the best of shape, so we're going to go ahead and polish it up a little bit, and then add some light grease to it, so it'll slide on in real nicely, and then we'll get ready to pop the wheel back on. Okay, so thin coating of grease on the axle, thin coating of grease on the axle bushings on both sides. Make sure you orient the tire correctly, which in this case we have the little Michelin guy and the arrow pointing. Make sure that the arrow is pointing in the direction of travel. I think Michelin also prints a little front identifier with a much larger arrow pointing to the front. Again, little Michelin guy here. Make sure those arrows are pointing forward. And then we should just be able to slide the tire back in place. Okay, so the wheel is on pretty much. It is worth noting that the R6 rim is directional. You can only install it one way. So if you notice here, these bumps right here on the rim, it's also, I think you can see it in one of these, yep, there's this little arrow right here on the rim that points forward. And that's the direction that it needs to rotate. Unfortunately, the shop that I took it to install these tires obviously didn't do their due diligence and installed the tire in the wrong rotation direction. So this tire is flipped. This is supposed to be front, and it's supposed to be going the other way, and it is not like that anymore. So that really sucks. I'm really disappointed that that's the case, especially because now it's been almost a month since I had this work done. You know, and while I'm sure they'd remember me, and I think I still have the receipt somewhere, like, it's just the fact that I'd have to go do it again that makes me really disappointed in this. All right, I got the wheel back on. The more I think about it, the angrier I get, knowing that they put the wheel on backwards, or the tire on backwards up front. You know, because like, I went out of my way on the rear to tell them what direction it was, you know, because that's a rare enough wheel. You don't see that on very many bikes that, you know, they may not just know. But the R6 rim, I figured they've probably seen enough R6s, and it still had the tire on it, and it had the directional markers on the rim itself. So I'm blown away that they fucked that up, and because of that, I'm probably not going back to that shop. So I'm gonna have to find a new one. But either way, I think we're ready to put the calipers back on. So before we do that, since we already have them off, before we do that, I want to go ahead and swap the brake pads so we make sure we got new brakes. We're still going to use the old rotors that came with this front clip. I think the old rotors are still in pretty good shape, even if they're a little dirty. So I think they're still pretty good. So we're gonna roll with it. I really hope the tread pattern being reversed isn't going to be a huge deal. Otherwise, I'm gonna end up having to take it back to another shop. For now, though, we're just gonna try and get these pads out and then get the caliper cleaned up. You really just need to get this retaining bracket out, and to do so, I think you pull these out. These retaining pins there. You see how the main brake pin there has that hole for these pins, so don't lose them. With both pins out, I think the pin just falls out. Like that. And you'll see this one is not in great shape. In all honesty, we should replace it, but I don't have a replacement at the moment. That looks okay. And then the pads themselves just fall right out. As you can see, these are not in the best of shape. They're pretty nasty. Pretty worn down. So, good thing that we're doing this job. Let's go ahead and clean this up, and we'll push the pistons back in. I'm pretty much going to open the bleed valve and just drain the fluid. Okay, go ahead and pop the bleeder valve open like we've done here, after which you can use a pair of needle nose pliers in between the pistons to help put them back in place. Okay, so with that cleaned up, we'll go ahead and swap the pads. These are, you know, just the EBC double H centered, pretty good track pads, I guess. There we go. These are much nicer than the ones that were on there. Yeah, I mean, look at those things. These were beat to hell comparatively. Okay, so for these things, I'm pretty sure you just slide them on in like this. Once they're in there, we'll put this this guy back in. Well, I'll tell you what we should do first. Is clean that up. Our little parts washing station. These two parts, the pin and the bracket, are probably worth cleaning up. Okay, and with the pistons pushed back in, do the same deal we did on the other side. Just drop these things in there, your new EBC pads. Right, then we'll get the bracket in place, and finally the pin. Last but not least, get the cotter pins back in place on the brake pin. And just like the other side, make sure it slides in place over the caliper. Get the mounting pins in place, and then we should be good to go. And if you'll recall, this is the speed sensor, which we had mounted right up here. It was kind of like this, I think. Yeah, it's kind of like that. We'll worry about putting that in place later, because we're going to have to pop these things off in order to replace it with the steel. So, okay, go ahead and tighten down these caliper slide bolts. Okay, so we got the bike back on its wheels, standing there pretty under its own power, without the help of the thing or stand. So this is the next thing that I want to do today, now that we got the wheel back on. If you recall, I mentioned in the last video, when we took the wheel off, that I thought one of the forks was probably leaking, and it looked pretty bad actually. So now that it's back on its wheels, and we can pump it up and down, I want to try this before I worry about seeing if I need to do a full rebuild. So one of the common things that we see happen a lot to motorcycle forks isn't really that the seals are bad. It's just that they have, you know, minuscule particles of dirt and grime or road dust or something in between the seal and the fork sleeve itself, which is what causes the leaks. So if you can clean that stuff out, you may not need to replace the seals for a while. So I'm hoping that's really the case with these. So we're going to give it a shot, and that's what this product is designed to help us do. This is something called SealMate from Motion Pro, and essentially all it is a real thin piece of plastic with this little hook on the end designed to pull that dirt and grime out. So let's tear it open here and see how this is going to work. This flimsy SealMate thing. So based on this, the idea is we're going to pull the dust seal away from the oil seal. We're going to clean it, and I do have this stuff here, this suspension cleaner that we're going to use to clean this up. We're going to clean it up, and then we're basically going to shove this up behind behind the oil seal, and then spin it around the fork a few times to get it all cleaned out. So let's give this a shot. So if you're looking at the forks, this is the dust seal here. Yep, sure enough. There we go, and pop that out. And we can kind of clean that up a little bit. You can see where it's pretty well oiled. Go ahead and try and clean it up there as much as we can. We take the SealMate, make sure it's clean. We jam it up in there. And we're gonna go around. And you see how it comes out wet like that. You know, so the idea is that we keep doing this supposedly until it comes out dry, which I feel like is going to take forever. But considering how easy it is to do, it seems sort of like a no-brainer. That's a good technique for fixing these forks rather than having to fully rebuild them. So hopefully this is good enough to fix that leak that we were having. And it's certainly coming out cleaner than it was. So it might be pretty close to being finished. Yeah. See how good that's getting. Okay, and when you're happy with it, you'll just put the dust seal back in place. Make sure it's good and clean too. And then before we pump these suspension pieces so that we reseat everything, we're going to want to do the same to the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. Once you're happy with what you think the SealMate has done, go ahead and give your suspension some good compression. Just so you can reseat these things. And then it's probably worth going and giving another quick visual inspection to see if you have any real apparent leaks. And that one looks like it might be good now. Same thing over there. I think we look pretty good. Even though on this end you can see some hairline cracks in this dust cover, which you might want to keep an eye on. But otherwise, for $6 or $7 for this tiny stupid little piece of plastic, knowing how to do that job, I think can save you a lot of money over time. Because there's a good chance your fork seals really aren't bad. There's just some tiny particles of dirt caught up in the seal that are causing that leak. So that's a pretty good buy. It's thin and flimsy, so it's going to wear out fast. $6 or $7 for this is absurd, really. You know, so they're raking in the money on this particular product. Being that it's so thin, I mean, you might be able to get away with using some other plastic that you have lying around at home. You know, just something to get up under there. And if you copy this little like hook, that'll help dig out some of that dirt in between the seal. You know, so you might be able to save some money making your own. But otherwise, this thing seems like a pretty good deal. Pretty good buy. Okay, so we'll hope that that does the trick in terms of cleaning up those fork seals. And I think that'll about wrap it up for episode 24. Okay, so we had a pretty good day today. We got the front wheel back on, we got the forks cleaned up. Hopefully that'll keep them from leaking and prevent me from having to you know, do a full fork rebuild on this thing. It's a really, like, if you've never done a fork rebuild job before, it's a lot of work. It's very involved. It's easy to mess up. Well, I guess it's not easy to mess up. It's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy job. It's just intensive. There's a lot of work that goes into doing it. Just getting the forks out is a huge pain. So hopefully we don't have to do that. Hopefully the SealMate will fix that up for us. But yeah, so getting the wheel back on, getting the pads back in. Tomorrow I'm hoping to be able to do the battery box. But over the maybe episode 25, we'll also get to do stainless steel braided brake lines up front. So that'll be fun. All right, so I guess that about wraps it up for episode 24. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, maybe check out my game Ethereal Legends on Steam, and yeah, catch up with you guys next time.